Welcome to episode 4 of Drawing with Mr. Sepulveda. On today's episode, I'm going to talk a little bit about my process when it comes to drawing eyes, heads, and faces. As you guys can see on the screen, I'm drawing a series of different eyes. The way that I approach eyes might be a little bit different than you. I like to start off with some basic shapes for how my eyes are supposed to appear, or what I'm thinking about, and then I will always add in some eyelids and then some eyebrows. I always think about eyes as being something that needs to be expressive. They're usually the first thing that you notice on a character, and so they do need to be somewhat appealing. Okay, as I start drawing, I'll make a few mistakes here and there, and then I'll adjust them just to make them look better. You'll see that happen right here, where I just didn't like the shape, and so I'm trying to mess around with shapes for these eyes. And then as you guys look at some of these eyes, you can kind of tell if they're going to be eyes for a female character or eyes for a male character. You'll see that I'll try different things. Sometimes I'll put in a pupil, sometimes I'll omit a pupil. I definitely have some highlights in there. I have darker areas and lighter areas when it comes to the eyes. The eyebrow shapes, I usually just kind of do something a little bit different each time. It all just kind of depends on what I'm doing. Right there is kind of like what I would have for like an alien eye or a dragon, depending on the style that I'm going for, if it's more realistic or if it's going to be a little bit more cartoony or a little bit more on the anime side. You'll see that I'll just kind of break apart the eye shapes a little bit with highlights. I'll use shapes like octagons, hexagons, rhombuses, triangles, right? I always try to find a shape for the eye first, and then I'll figure out if I'm going to use a pupil, and then I'll go ahead and figure out where my eyelids would be and how I want to shape the eyebrows in each case, okay? I always mess around with different eyes. I'm usually not afraid to make mistakes, because if I don't like it, then I just try and start my process all over again, right? This one's going to be more or less a cat eye. As you can see how I'm just trying to put in this like little slit piece right here. I'm going to shade it in and then put in some highlights kind of going towards the center, kind of like a demonic cat type of eye right there. And then there's the eyebrow. Sometimes I'll go traditional almond shape, but ultimately, if I'm trying to make a unique character, I try not to make it super normal, if that makes any sense. And then I'll show you in just a moment like a traditional anime manga eye right here, right, that you might be familiar with, where I'll just, there's the eyelids, there's the eyebrow, I'll shade in that area right there, round it out a little bit. I'll take away sections with the highlights, just like that, right? I'll cut right through the edge of that eye, and then I'll cut open the highlights on the bottom, and then just another little whisk of a line right there. But I think eyes can be a lot of fun. I like to mess around with how they might look. They don't work for every character that you make, right? Sometimes they're like really unique to the one character that you've got. And I think that's what makes them really interesting. I had fun with this one where I put a little star highlight inside of the eye right there. And then you'll see it in this last example of this eye, where I start shading it in darker, and then when I don't like it, I just use my eraser, I'll just like carve out pieces that I'm just not a fan of, and then ultimately it'll turn out a lot better, because I usually don't go into it with like an expectation until I kind of figure out what I want the head and face to look like. With that being said, we're going to shift gears to heads. I'll use somewhat of a Loomis method sometimes. I like guidelines. Guidelines help me keep my characters more or less consistent. You'll see that I'll come up with the sphere, and then I'll cut the sphere in half. I'll just kind of go around with the sphere on the side, right? and that'll kind of show me where my ear is going to go, where the jaw is going to come down from. The middle line kind of shows where I'll place my eyes. Top line could be like hairline or eyebrows, depending on how big I want to make the face. And then I'll use that last line for the nose area, and to also help guide my mouth and chin area, which will be about like 2/3 of the way down. Just shading in underneath the neck, just putting in some details into the ears. But in just a moment you'll see this, what I'm talking about with placing the eyebrows and placing the eyes. So this one's more of a generic face right here, putting in an eye right there. There we go, the eyelids, shading them in, taking away some parts, putting in the pupil, putting in some more highlights. Sometimes I go a little too crazy with the highlights. Definitely gotta contain that a little bit. So there's just like a generic face right there. Here I go trying to put in another different shape for the eyeball for this character here on the right. Gonna shade it in, color it in. There's the eyelids, there's the eyebrows, darken up the actual eyeball. There's the pupils, and then here I am taken away from it by putting in some highlights into the eyes. I'm going to use that last line for where the nose's location is, and then about 2/3 of the way down I'll put in the mouth and then the chin. Right, it's just a simplistic smile over here, and I'll just like use the eraser to carve it out a little bit. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and add a third one. This one's going to be more of a dramatic angle. You can see how I use that circle on the side to help me. I'll cut it in the middle to place my ear, but also to know where the jaw is going to come from, right? It'll also help me place my neck underneath the chin. Okay. Going to shade underneath that neck area. Use these guidelines to figure out where the placement of my character's eyes are going to be, where the nose is going to be, and then put in the eyelids, put in the eyebrows, right? So this is my general approach to how I will create a face and create a head, okay? Putting in some details right there in the ear. There we go. And I'm going to show you what I do when I'm done with them. So like for head number 1, this is what I ultimately did with the character, right? How I would color it in, how I would highlight it in, how I would shade it in. And I'm going to show you head 2 and then finally head number 3. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the video. I appreciate you guys for showing up and watching this. Please, if you haven't hit the like button, hit that. And if you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and do that as well. Have a good one.